Hello again, welcome back to Hangar 51. Today we're going to do a video on setting up the timers in your Taranis Plus. Now, as the title says, this is the Taranis Plus with 2.0 firmware. If you've updated your firmware to 2.1 or higher, this video may or may not be any help to you whatsoever, because some of the screens are different, a lot of the screens have different names now, and it definitely programs different. I do not have easy access to a 2.1 Taranis radio. I do have some limited access to one. So if you're having trouble, if you're running 2.1 and you're having trouble following my tutorial here today, you can ask me a question in the comments below, but I don't know if I'll be able to answer it. So my suggestion would be to copy the link to my video and go over to Painless360. Super great guy over there. He's got a really nice show and he's very familiar with the 2.1 firmware. Link my video over to him and say, hey, how do I make my 2.1 firmware do this? And link my video. He'll watch my video, he'll understand the question, and then he can probably answer your question. So again, I have very limited access to 2.1. Listen, I'm a firm believer, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So the 2.0 has worked absolutely flawless for me. I had no reason to update it. I have not updated it. I can tell you from personal experience of helping others with the 2.1, I do not like it. I think they've complicated it. It's much harder to set up. You may or may not agree after watching my videos. I'm going to do a whole series of videos here. So after you've watched them all, you can make your own determination. But anyway, so today we're going to just do the timers. So how do you set up the timers in this radio and how do they work? Let me show you what... so on your first, well, it's actually screen 2, because screen 1, if you look here, 1 of 12, and you probably have 13 or 14 screens if you're running 2.1, is your menu screen where you pick the model you're going to fly. Okay, and then screen 2 is your basic radio setup, and this is where you put the name of the model you're flying and the picture of the model you're flying. And then there's timers, timer 1, timer 2. So if you look here, let me scroll down. Here it says throttle percentage is what I have it set for. Now you can pick any switch on the radio, any lever on the radio, whatever you want it to be. It's all available. But I think Taranis had intended for it to be a throttle, and I'm going to tell you why. Because there's 3 different throttle settings you can set it for, and I'm going to explain all 3 of them. I use the throttle to start the timer because as soon as I activate the throttle, the timer starts running. You can't forget to turn it on. So I really like using the throttle, and apparently because they give you 3 choices, I'm guessing that's what they intended it to be. So first one is throttle T. Throttle T is, for me, it means throttle true, true throttle, throttle true. When you set it for throttle T, it's going to start the timer and the timer's going to run. No matter what position you put the throttle, the throttle stick in, even if you shut the throttle off, the timer will continue to run, and it'll run until you set whatever you set this timer for. Okay, it's a countdown timer. So I have it set for 5 minutes, and it'll count down, and it'll run until it hits that, and then it continues to run. But then it goes into negative. So even though it's a countdown to 5, it's after it hits 5, it doesn't stop, it keeps running, but then it shows negative. So if you fly farther than 5 minutes, 6, 7 minutes, you're going to get a negative 2 minute. You add the 2 together, the negative 2 plus the 5, and you get a total of 7 minutes. So that's number 1, throttle T for throttle true. Then there's throttle percentage. Now what that is, let me exit out of here for a second and I'll show you what that means. I have the throttle true at the bottom here, and I'll give you some incidents when you would want to use that and when you might not want to use that. But we got the throttle percentage and throttle true. So what I'm going to do here, let me reset my timer, is I'm going to put this throttle at half throttle.
99.
Okay, so what do we have? We have the bottom timer's running seconds. At 50% throttle, this is running at half seconds or 2-second intervals. So for every time this changes once or twice, this changes once because we're at 50% throttle. So the throttle percentage is running at half speed because we're at half throttle. Full throttle, it'd be running full speed. Less throttle, it slows down even more. You know, we're down to about maybe an eighth of a throttle here. And you can see that the percentage one now is all but stopped.
Minus 93.
Okay, not minus 93 means we're at negative 93. If 0 is mid-stick, half throttle, half stick, you know, center, stick center, then we're at negative 93% throttle. And I'm going to get into that in the next video. But
5 minutes minus 93.
So you just heard her say 5 minutes. It's counting down. And you can set that on both, and we'll get back to that. But I just wanted to show you how this percentage throttle. Now I'm going to go to full throttle, and now you'll see that they work together. They're moving at the same speed. So what would you use that for? Well, it's a really good. I use it for battery usage. Basically, if you're in the throttle more, you're using more battery, and if you're throttling less, you're conserving battery. So once you get it, you know, dialed into each battery pack in each model that you're flying, you know, it gives you a really true reading of how far into the throttle or how far into the battery you are based on how hard you're flying it. You know, one day you might be flying it slower, and the next day you might be flying it more wide open, and you know, that timer, once you get it dialed into the model, will give you a more accurate usage of the battery than just a standard timer. So that's what you would probably use the throttle percentage for. That's what I use it for. It's a good indication to give me a second timer. You know, maybe this day I was flying it pretty aggressively. You know, normally I go off the regular timer, the true timer, you know, and I'm flying it more aggressively. And then, you know, okay, well, maybe I want to listen to my percentage today because I've been flying a little harder than normal. So, you know, maybe I should keep an eye on that. So that's what I would use the percentage for. I really like that feature. And then the true timer, what I use that for is when I'm flying my glider. So I throttle up and I'm flying around and I cut the throttle. I don't want the timer to stop. I want the timer to keep running because I want to know what my total flight time is. So the top one, the percentage, is telling me how much of my battery I've used to get the glider up and maybe go back up. Maybe it's, you know, I lost the thermal, it came down, and I throttle up and go back up again. So that's giving me my battery usage, and the bottom timer is giving me my total flight time. You know, so I can set it for, I usually set it for 30 minutes on the glider, and then, of course, it keeps running. It's going to go into negative once it's in past the 30-minute mark, and you know, you just add the two together. But the whatever you set the timer for is going to give you a countdown to that. Once it gets to 0 and starts running into negative, it's not going to notify you anymore, but the timer will keep running. And that goes for the percentage one as well. And then you have one more choice, and I'm going to show you that one. So your third choice on the throttle is Throttle S, which is Throttle Stop. What that means is that when you throttle up, as long as the throttle's in anything above 100% negative 100%, which is the throttle down, off, the timer will run at normal interval, normal seconds. But if you cut the throttle off all the way, it stops. The S means Throttle Stop. So it'll stop the timer. So again, that can be used instead of the percentage timer. You could use that on a glider, so that you know you used 30 seconds of throttle getting up, and then when you shut it, the throttle off, the timer stops. So you know, that's one of the uses for it. You know, you might have other ideas for it. Maybe you've already set that up, and that's fine. But this, like I said, they must have intended you to use the throttle for the timers. And you have two timers here, 1 and 2. My guess is that because you have 3 choices in the throttle, they wanted you to use the throttle. But those are your 3 choices. So you've got throttle T, which is throttle true time. It just keeps it running whether you throttle off or not. You have throttle S, which is, you know, as long as it's in any position, the timer runs normal seconds, but when you cut the throttle all the way off, it stops. And then the throttle percentage, which is, you know, it increases in speed as you increase throttle position. Full throttle, it runs at normal intervals, regular seconds. Anything below that, it slows down according to how much throttle you're pulling it down to. So those are your choices there. Now the next thing down, we have, well, here's your time. You can set the time to whatever, you know, once you've got your plane dialed in, you'll know it's a 5, 6, 7, 8 minute timer, whatever you want to set it at. And then the next one here is, do you want it to be manual reset, flight time, off? I have it in flight. I always put it in flight. I really don't know what, because it's still a manual reset, so I don't know why it says manual reset and flight. But I always put it in flight, because you have to manually reset it anyway. And then the next one down is your minute call. I have that checked. I like it every minute, you know, she'll say, you know, 4 minutes, and then 3 minutes, 2 minutes. And then when she gets down to under, I think it's under 30 seconds, she starts giving you 10-second intervals to the 10-second mark, and then she counts it down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, or 8 to 0. So I like the minute call. I always check that. And then your next one down is your countdown. How do you want the countdown? Do you want voice? Do you want beeps? Do you want it silent? So you don't have to have it count down if you don't want it to. You can have it beep at you as it's counting down, or you can have the voice actually call it out. And I like the voice. So that's how I set it. And you know, you have 2 timers on your screen. So you can pick any 2 of the 3 choices you have if you're going to use it in the throttle. You may want to use a switch. Just set it for a switch if you want to do it that way. I don't like the switch idea because I forget to turn it on. You know, I get in the air and I forget to hit the switch, and then the timer's not accurate. And if the timer's not accurate, it really isn't very helpful, other than to tell you what your flight time was. But if you're trying to use it to time your battery usage, it really isn't very useful. So when you throttle up, you definitely, listen, as soon as you throttle, you're using power. That's when you want the timer to start, if you're using it for your battery gauge. So I think that's your best choice. And then, of course, on the main screen, there are your 2 displays. And that's all you need to do for the timers to make them run. Now, for resetting the timer, you have to go into your function screen. So let's go there and I'll show you how you set that up. It's a very simple... so right here, if you see what my third one down is, right here, it says, and I use the spring-loaded switch back here, the SH switch, in the down position, which means every time I flick it down, it resets the timer. So you set SH down, set it to reset, timer 1, and then you check the box over here to activate it. And then you use, and you can, again, you can use any switch you want. I just like using the spring-loaded one because I don't have to remember to switch it back off. You know, if you use a solid switch and you switch it to that position, then the timer won't work. So if you flip the timer on or move the throttle, the timer's not going to run because it's set to reset. So it's going to override the throttle working. So that's why I use the spring-loaded switch. It's also a time. I know it's the trainer switch in most cases. And I'm not doing any training right now. And on a model that I'm going to be using the training on, I won't set that as the timer reset. I'll use something else. But that's how I do it. Just my suggestion on how to utilize these timers, what they do, and how best to use them. You know, play with them, check them out, see what you think. I think you'll you'll find them useful. I do like the timers, especially just for knowing what my flight time was. It's very useful for that. I don't really use it for my battery usage anymore because I'm using telemetry. That video's coming up. That's really the way you want to do it. But if you're not going to do it that way, these timers are definitely useful and helpful, and that's where you set them at. So you just go to your screen. It should be on this, even on the 2.1 software. It should be on the same screen you set your model name and picture. It should be on that screen. And you have your throttle, your timer 1 and timer 2, and that's how they're just going to be displayed on the main screen. Timer 1, timer 2. So, okay, so that's all on the timer setup. Like me here, comment below, like me here on YouTube, like me on Facebook, and stay tuned for the next video coming right up. Alright, talk to you later. Bye-bye.